the end of the season. I don't get to see this gentleman now for a while. The one and only, long-time, legendary voice of the Kings, Gary Gerould, with us. How are you today, Gary?
All good. Thanks, Whitey.
What do you think you're going to remember the most about this just completed season?
The fact that it was unlike probably any other season in the 39 years of the Kings in Sacramento. The fact that it was such a roller coaster ride.
Mm-hmm.
Now I got a frog here. Give me
no
a
problem.
second.
Yeah, you got it. No worries. Certainly entitled.
That's what happened when you put in 40 legendary years.
Yes.
Let me tell you something.
It's going to happen.
You got 40 legendary years in the books, man. Sometimes you got to readjust your pipes.
No, it's the company you keep and the impact that the company has, and suddenly I can't perform. I'm just.
But unlike any other season, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember a season that was so full of one surprise after another, and the inconsistency of performance. And I think that's kind of the signature, the trademark that I'm left with in year 39 of the Kings in Sacramento.
G-Man, something that I don't think I've ever asked, and I don't think I've heard this be asked to you, and I'm pretty sure you've gotten this and had thought about this. Man, what keeps you going? What keeps the G-Man continuing to be legendary and being the hero to people like myself here in Sacramento that have looked up to you for years, and you continuing to want to be a part of the NBA?
Well, first, you're very, very kind in saying that, and I do appreciate that. I'm blessed to have the opportunity that I do. I love basketball. I love NBA basketball. I love, being a play-by-play broadcaster. It's something that I always wanted to do from as young an age as I could ever remember, which is pretty unusual. There are not a lot of folks in this world who get to do something that they wanted to do and dreamed of doing as a youngster. And at my age, to be able to still have that opportunity, I thoroughly enjoy it, and I look forward to it. And Whitey said, I miss you guys. It's crazy. I don't think any of us are ever quite ready for the abruptness with which a season ends, and it's just reality. And then you go through a couple of weeks where you try to start making the transition from, the day-to-day preparation and the game every other day, and just being around these people and being energized by what you see on the floor. And I'm not talking about just from a King standpoint. I'm talking about it from a professional athlete standpoint. We're so fortunate to be able to watch these games and almost, it doesn't happen every night, but sooner or later you see something that you've never seen before. And I love that aspect of this game and the uncertainty and the fact that one night you're down against the Lakers. I don't remember what it was, 20 something in the first quarter. And by halftime, you're up by 15 or something. It was like almost a 40-point swing. Those things just don't happen. But when they do, to be part of it is extraordinarily special.
I missed my guess there, G-Man. When Jay asked what keeps you going, I would have guessed it was the pregame cookies, because we know how delicious they are. But I wanted to ask you about, once Malik was injured, what do you think, besides the scoring, obviously, what did the Kings miss the most once Malik went down with that injury?
Well, you miss the infusion of energy and talent. There's no question. And it wasn't, I think we frequently look at, because of Malik's charisma and his personality and his dynamics on the floor, we overlook somewhat the loss of Kevin Huerter. And Kevin was the first to say that, he had a really disappointing year and he had his struggles. But when you take two key rotational players out of your top 6 or 7, it puts an awful lot of pressure, if you will. And I know everybody deals and defines pressure in different ways, but it puts a lot of pressure in my mind on young players who are asked to step up and to perform at a level that perhaps we haven't seen them. And I think, of course, of a Keon Ellis, and you think about a Trey Lyles, and you think about different folks who were afforded that opportunity. And coaches always talk about the next man up mentality. It's one of the great cliches of professional sports, but it's very true. So you miss the dynamic personality of Malik Monk, along with his ability to create off the dribble. And I think that that's one of the areas where Sabonis and company, it really made life tough, because without him and a defense that had to respect Malik's ability to drive and attack the basket, they were a little more free to, clog up the middle, throw 2 and 3 defenders around Sabonis, have them dig and claw and scratch and trying to knock the ball away and force turnovers. Those are the kind of things that I think really hurt the Kings in the stretch run of the season.
Joined by the legendary Gary Gerald, the G-Man, here on Sac Sports 1140. Legend, one of the things that I always admire, as someone like yourself who's been in it long enough, you get to jump around the country and talk to a lot of analysts and people who get to see a lot of basketball games. What's your take on some of the disrespect? And for my job as media, we get to, I guess, partake in the conversation of the fact that Domantas Sabonis doesn't seem to be as expected as we would love it to be here in Sacramento. What's your take on just being able to intertwine with some of the best basketball heads and what they feel about Domantas Sabonis?
Well, almost universally, every time you would listen to an opposing head coach or members of their staff talk about the night's game plan against the Kings, it always started with De'Aaron Fox and his speed and quickness and the strength and the dribble handoff capability the offense is built around with Domantas Sabonis. I mean, that was just an inevitable. It happened every night, every time you go into a news conference with the coach or members of the coaching staff, that's what you would hear. So I think there's respect there. But that being said, it still doesn't explain to me why Sabonis wasn't an all-star this year. And I just don't understand that at all. Because as I have said on so many different occasions, the thing that's impressed me the most about Domantas is the fact that not only is he talented, but it's his dedication to his craft. And the fact that he plays without taking a night off, and he plays without basically taking a possession off. And I don't know that I can remember a player that I could say that about in the 39 previous years of the Kings in Sacramento. There have been a lot of good players who've come through, but almost all of them had, off nights. And that's not to say that Sabonis didn't have off nights, but in terms of effort and intensity, he's unmatched in my mind in Sacramento Kings history.
G-Man, to that point, and not to dredge up more painful recollections, but I saw what you tweeted about Malik. How surprised were you that Malik came up short in the Sixth Man of the Year voting?
I was really disappointed, and I was afraid that was going to happen, and I was afraid it was because of the inactivity of the last 3 weeks of the season. Mm-hmm. If you're not there, you're quickly forgotten, and people weren't seeing on a nightly basis just how dynamic his game is and how important to any King's success he was. What a great contributor. And I was afraid that was going to happen. And you could almost sense there was a little momentum shift toward Reed. And I thought, he had a terrific year and he was on top. But the fact that he was starting games late in the season and putting up some of those numbers, I think that slid by some of the voters. And I was disappointed. And I thought that Malik was certainly deserving. And in my mind, he's the Sixth Man of the Year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you, G-Man. I've said it numerous times. I understand what you're saying, out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes, people move on, and Naz Reid battling with Minnesota. But G-Man, kind of piggybacking on something like that, but moving forward as far as Keegan Murray, I think we all see Keegan has the opportunity to be special, but you've had the opportunity to be with him the last couple of years and see him grow and mature as a young man. Is he on the right path in your mind to becoming the next, big piece here in Sacramento?
Without question. In my mind, he certainly is. And I love the fact that, and I said it back when we went to training camp and we were learning about how every day was spent in the summer working with De'Aaron Fox and trying to, ingrain into Keegan as a young NBA player the need to be more than a spot-up perimeter shooter, of which he excelled as a rookie. But to see him take the step this year, not only on the offensive end, but on the defensive end, and sometimes forgetting that almost on a nightly basis, he was getting the toughest defensive assignments through the first 2/3 of the season. And to see him accelerate his game, elevate his game, I just thought was so promising. We sometimes, and I try frequently to look at things in its proper perspective, or in what my mind considers the proper perspective. And you have to take a step back and you have to look at the big picture, and you realize he's 23 years old. He's still a pup in the NBA game. And he was able to do some stuff that shows it. I mean, just how tantalizing to see him attacking the basket off the dribble, gaining confidence and trying to create on the offensive end in different ways, and doing that after expending so much energy on the defensive end. So I'm all in on Keegan Murray. And I know that you guys are the kings of speculation, and I can't talk about different names
Right.
in the last segment, but man, I think Keegan Murray is a Sacramento King for a long time to come. Now, I could be totally wrong. I mean, if the right opportunity comes up for Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, the front office, they explore any and all opportunities. And I've always said, they know so much more about the game than I do, and
100%.
for the most part, any of us do. Leave it to them to make the decisions and then live with their decisions.
Gary Gerald with us, and Gary, you may have actually had this conversation with Jerry, but Jerry Reynolds likes to point out to us that Keegan this year, while some of us maybe were expecting more, maybe he was, Keegan had a better second year in the NBA than Peja did. And Jerry says, I don't know if he's going to be as good as Peja, but he says in year 2, Keegan had a better second year than even Peja did. And so that's it's important to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's some real food for thought, because you look at the great career of Peja Stojakovic, and if Keegan can be in that shadow and hold his own in terms of his ongoing growth, man, that speaks volumes for the future of the Kings.
G-Man, I think, and we're joined by the legendary Gary Gerald, as he doesn't need any introduction. You hear the sultry tones from the G-Man, but
Sultry.
Sultry tones. G-Man, I've always believed, honestly, G-Man could be anything. He could announce anything, and I think I would listen to it. That's just me, and I think a lot of
I would pay
Sacramento
to listen
fans
to him
would do
reading
it.
the phone book.
There's no phone books anymore. Stop dating yourself.
That would make it even more fun. Yeah.
But as someone who has quickly become, I think, not only a fan favorite, but for me, my favorite is Keon Ellis. I truly think he is a diamond in the rough, and I'm hoping that the Kings have unearthed him, and giving him a brush across the back to shine. What's your thoughts on Keon Ellis's year, from the beginning, the transition of the beginning of not getting a lot of minutes to, starting at the end?
Well, again, you look at the big picture, so to speak. We're talking about a guy that was undrafted coming out of Alabama. Nobody wanted him in the NBA, at least when it came to the NBA draft. And for him to earn a slot as a two-way designated player and playing with the Stockton Kings, as well as getting limited minutes for the Sacramento Kings, to see that blossom in, February, into a standard NBA contract, and then because of the injuries to Kevin Huerter, to take that starting role and perform the way he did, I think it caught all of us a little bit by surprise. I love his wingspan. I love his defensive approach to the game. And we used to joke with him in training camp about, I called him the disruptor, because that's what he just seemed to relish, that being a disruptive force, getting his hands on balls, deflections, steals, whatever. And to see him down the stretch have games where he'd have multiple steals, multiple block shots, and on occasion get on a hot stretch there and knock down multiple three-pointers.
Mm-hmm.
Man, what's not to like? I mean, I'm a big fan too of Keon Ellis.
G-Man, to follow that, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I just want to ask you, is in your mind, is Keon a starter? Could he be a starter in the league?
I think so. I think it takes a period of time, and there's certainly a lot of room for growth, and he'll be the first to admit that. But the fact is, I think that the coaches look at him as someone who is like a sponge and who soaks up knowledge, and who wants to be, who's striving to be, the best player he can be at both ends of the floor. And so, depending on the situation, depending on what team, when you talk about a starting role, it might be a little early for that. I don't know, but I'm along for the ride. I want to see how this plays out for this young man because he has really intrigued me. I mean, I'm just looking at a couple of notes that I had here from my spotting board from the end of the season. He had 3 or more steals 7 times.
Wow.
This is a guy that didn't, really get extended minutes until the final month of the season. So I'm intrigued with Keon Ellis, and I think we all are in a sense. And none of us know what the roster is going to look like going into training camp. And could he be an expendable piece? Who knows? I don't know that even Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox would know if you said right now, because everything is predicated on what's offered, what's available, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of speculation and a lot of research is going to be done over the coming weeks. And I'm already anxious.
Yeah.
When we get to the end of September to go into training camp and say, okay, who's on this roster? Mm-hmm. And I think that, in my mind, and again, this is just me talking. I think that based on the fact that the Kings wanted the stability and they didn't make significant roster changes last season, they wanted to see what that core group could do. Well, they didn't have, the good luck with injuries that teams seldom have. And the fact that they weren't catching anybody by surprise, they had a target on their back. The fact that, the Western Conference was as tough as it's been in the last couple of decades, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any easier anytime soon. All of those things influence the fact that it looks like it's time now for the Kings to really get serious about exploring what could be a significant roster. I don't want to say upheaval, but change. Mm-hmm. And I'm intrigued by it. I think we all are fascinated by it. But again, I mean, I'm one who just says, okay, surprise me. Let's see how it plays out. And then let's go forward from whatever we have to work with. I'm a big believer in Mike Brown and his staff. I think they've done wonders. They're going to miss Jordi Fernandez immensely, but these are quality people in this organization who genuinely like each other, and they like and foster the family experience. And it's revitalized me as a broadcaster over the last couple of years, not only with, more wins and a more competitive nature. That always helps. But it's fun to be a Sacramento Kings fan. Yes, it's frustrating as all get out at different times, but it's still fun. And I was thinking yesterday, it was 11 years ago yesterday that the relocation committee had that 7-0 vote that said, we are not recommending that the Kings go anywhere, but they stay in Sacramento. And it was just a matter of a couple of weeks later that became reality. And I am so thankful that that was the case.
Absolutely. By the way, speaking of Keon, it's funny, G-Man, of course, we're talking with Gary Gerould. During the season, around the trade deadline, a lot of us, we were talking about, boy, the Kings could use a 3-and-D guy. They could use a 3-and-D guy. They didn't make a trade, but Keon Ellis ended up being a really solid 3-and-D guy. It was kind of funny. I wanted to ask you, G-Man, before we let you go, De'Aaron Fox talked about how this was a disappointing year in a lot of ways, but he said, there's things we can build on. What did you see that the Kings established individually, perhaps as a team, scheme-wise? What did they establish this year that, in your mind, is something that they could build on into next season?
Well, I think familiarity with the system of Mike Brown and the fact that they did become a better defensive team, if you believe the numbers, mm-hmm. and I happen to believe the numbers, and I think that was a huge step in the right direction. Some will say, but yes, they took a big step backwards in offensive production. Well, yeah, they did, and the numbers indicate that is the case. It wasn't super dramatic, but again, going to the inconsistencies of the season, the fact that there were, 4 games that were 20-point leads weren't good enough. Mm-hmm. That's kind of today's NBA, as opposed to a couple of decades ago. But I think the Kings have made progress defensively. I think that, their core group still remains young. They've got them under contract. I'm anxious to see, how Kevin Huerter responds after the surgery in a training camp and what kind of shape and contribution he can be in after a down season. So there are a lot of intriguing aspects. There always are, and I'm encouraged. I always want to be encouraged. I just love the fact that as tough as the West is, the Kings found a way to be competitive against the Thunder and the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas, Phoenix. Now they couldn't beat New Orleans. We all know that. And that still is a mystery in my mind.
I know.
How the fact that they just owned the Sacramento Kings this year. But going forward, I still think it's going to be tough in the West, but I think the Kings will be in the mix. And that's enough for me to be fired up about right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. G-Man, before we let you go, what does the G-Man have on the docket for the summer? What does G-Man do on his off time? What are you looking forward to yourself this summer, G-Man?
Well, it'll be pretty low key. My wife's health is not good, and so I do an awful lot here as the guy in the house, and I just I hope that she has better days ahead, and I hope that we can enjoy some of those. We'll try to sneak away for a couple of timeshare opportunities down at Aviera and Carlsbad and up at Incline Village in Lake Tahoe, and interspersed with that, hopefully be many rounds of golf, some of which will not be totally frustrating.
Frank LaRosa is probably going to be part of that, right?
Yeah, Frank and Scott Marsh and Chad Widger, we play a lot of golf and we enjoy each other's company, and it's fun to be able to do that. And for many years, because of my travel and the off-season work that I did at the networks in terms of television, primarily in motorsports, I didn't have an opportunity to play more than some summers. It was only once or twice that I got a chance to play golf. But now that's a whole different animal. And so I'm hoping to spend some time in the golf course, and I hope that maybe there'll be more birdies and fewer double bogeys.
Well, thank you so much for your time. You've always been so generous with your time, and thanks for the element of class you've brought to the proceedings today. We appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again real soon, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
All right. The one and only Gary Gerould with us. We will come right back with a look at how we may be entering a golden era for small market NBA teams. And we're going to take a closer look at what the G-Man had to say about his belief that the Kings may be on the verge of a big roster move. It's all coming up here. It's Jay and Whitey today. Drapes back tomorrow. Drive, guys. Sacktown Sports.